She did not look like someone who belonged on that stage. When she walked out from behind the curtain, a quiet wave of confusion passed through the audience. Some leaned forward in their seats, others exchanged quick looks, trying to understand why she was there. She stood still for a moment, holding her hands together, her shoulders slightly tense, as if she already felt the weight of every eye in the room. She was dressed simply. Nothing flashy, nothing that suggested confidence or fame. Her clothes looked neat but ordinary, like something worn to a regular day of work, not a performance meant to impress. Her hair was tied back carefully, as if she did not want it to distract anyone. To many people watching, she looked out of place, like she had wandered onto the wrong stage by mistake. The audience that day was used to polished performers. They expected bold entrances, confident smiles, and people who carried themselves like they knew they deserved to be there. But she did not have that kind of presence. She walked slowly, carefully, as if she was afraid of making noise. Every step felt measured, every movement careful. It was clear she was nervous. A few quiet laughs could be heard. Not loud enough to stop the show, but enough to be felt. Some people whispered to each other, their faces showing doubt. A few shook their heads slightly, already deciding that this performance would not be worth their time. To them, she was an unlikely presence, someone who did not match their idea of talent. What they did not know was how much courage it had taken for her to stand there. Her life had never prepared her for moments like this. She came from a simple background where survival mattered more than dreams. She was used to blending in, not standing out. Most days, she worked quietly, doing her job without drawing attention. She listened more than she spoke. She learned to stay small because being noticed had never brought her anything good. Music had always been a private part of her life. It was something she turned to when no one was watching. She never imagined sharing it with strangers, especially not in a room full of people ready to judge her before she even began. Yet somehow she had found herself here, standing under bright lights, facing an audience that had already made up its mind. Her heart was beating fast. She could feel it in her chest, in her ears, even in her hands. For a brief moment she thought about turning back. It would be easy to walk away, to disappear again into the quiet life she knew so well. No one expected anything from her anyway. No one would stop her. But then she remembered why she had come. She remembered the long nights when music was the only thing that made her feel alive. The moments when she played or sang quietly, letting emotions flow out in ways words never could. Music had been her comfort, her strength, her secret friend. It had carried her through loneliness, fear, and doubt. Standing there, she reminded herself that this moment was not about the people watching. It was about staying true to herself. She took a slow breath. The room felt cold, but she steadied herself. Even if no one believed in her, she would believe in what she had practiced, in what she felt deep inside. She did not need applause. She only needed a chance. The audience continued to watch, some with curiosity, others with boredom. A few were already checking their phones, convinced nothing special was about to happen. To them, she was just another forgettable performer. Someone who would be gone in a few minutes, leaving no impact behind. But inside her, something shifted. She realized that being underestimated was something she had lived with her whole life. People had always looked past her, assumed she was ordinary, expected very little. In a strange way, this moment felt familiar. The stage was new, but the feeling was not. And just like before, she knew she had only one choice to move forward. She adjusted her posture slightly, lifted her head, and focused on what she came to do. The noise of the room faded into the background. The judgment, the whispers, the quiet mockery, all of it slowly lost its power. What remained was her and the performance waiting to begin. No one in the audience knew it yet, but the unlikely presence standing before them carried a story, a depth, and an emotion far greater than her appearance suggested. She had not come to prove anything to them. She had come to speak through her performance, in the only language that had ever truly understood her. And in just a few moments, the same people who doubted her presence would be forced to see her in a completely different light. She did not plan to be there that day. In fact, she almost turned back twice before reaching the entrance. The building looked too grand, too serious, like a place meant for confident people with strong voices and perfect appearances. She stood outside for a few moments, holding her bag tightly, taking slow breaths as if gathering courage piece by piece. Her life had never prepared her for a stage like this. She came from a quiet background where people worked hard, spoke softly, and stayed invisible. Attention was something she had learned to avoid. Being noticed often meant being judged, and she had experienced enough of that already. Inside the hall, everything felt overwhelming. Bright lights hung from the ceiling. Rows of seats were filled with people talking loudly, laughing, and checking their phones. Some looked confident, others excited. Many looked important. She felt small among them, like she did not belong. Her clothes were simple, neat, but plain. Nothing about her stood out in a good way, and she knew it. As she walked further in, she noticed eyes turning toward her. Some people paused their conversations. A few looked confused, others curious. There were quiet smiles, the kind that were not friendly. She heard faint whispers, not clear enough to understand fully, but clear enough to feel. Her shoulders tightened. She lowered her gaze and continued walking. She took a seat near the side, hoping to disappear into the background. Her hands rested on her lap, fingers moving nervously. She reminded herself why she had come. Not for attention, not for approval. She had come because this was the one place where her voice mattered, even if only for a few minutes. While waiting, she observed the others. Many performers practiced confidently, stretching their voices, warming up, talking about techniques and training. Some had family members with them, offering encouragement and advice. She had come alone. No one knew she was there. No one was waiting to clap for her. That loneliness felt heavy, but it was also familiar. She had lived with it for years. Her mind drifted back to the many times she had been told to stay quiet. At school, teachers had mistaken her silence for weakness. At work, people often spoke over her, assuming she had nothing important to say. She had learned to accept it, to shrink herself to make others comfortable. But deep inside, something still wanted to be heard. When her name was called for the first time during registration, the voice at the desk hesitated, as if unsure they had read it correctly. She answered softly, confirming it was her. The person nodded and moved on, already distracted by someone else. That brief moment reminded her again how easy it was for people to overlook her. As the event continued, performers took turns going on stage. Some were good, some average, some clearly trained. The audience reacted politely, clapping at the right moments. She watched carefully, not comparing herself but learning. She noticed how people stood, how they breathed, how they handled mistakes. She listened not just with her ears but with her heart. Still, doubt crept in. What if she froze? What if her voice failed her? What if the laughter she feared became real? The thought made her stomach twist. She considered leaving quietly, slipping out before anyone noticed she was gone. But then she remembered all the nights she had practiced alone. All the moments she had held back tears, using music to survive difficult days. She remembered the feeling of singing softly in empty rooms, where no one judged her and every note felt honest. That feeling gave her strength. When her turn came closer, her heart began to race. She stood slowly, legs slightly unsteady. People noticed movement and glanced in her direction. Some raised eyebrows. A few smiled again, the same doubtful smiles. She ignored them, focusing instead on the calm she had learned to find inside herself. Each step toward the stage felt heavy, but also meaningful. She knew that just by walking forward, she was doing something brave. She was stepping into a space where she had never been welcomed before. She reached the edge of the stage and paused. The room was quiet now, filled with expectation and judgment. She felt exposed, but she also felt something else, determination. No matter what happened next, she had already made a choice. She had chosen to be seen. And sometimes that choice alone is powerful enough to change everything. She stood backstage, holding her hands together tightly, trying to keep them from shaking. The sounds of the audience reached her ears in broken pieces. Laughter, casual talk, the scrape of chairs, the confident voices of people who believed they belonged there. Every sound made her heart beat faster. She had waited weeks for this moment, yet now that it had arrived, she felt smaller than ever. She looked down at her clothes and wondered, not for the first time, if she had made a mistake. They were simple and plain, chosen carefully because they were the best she owned. Still, they looked out of place here. Around her, other performers adjusted shining outfits, fixed their hair, and practiced with confidence. Some smiled easily, as if the stage was their second home. She felt like a guest who had walked into the wrong room. She remembered how hard it had been to even sign up. The form had asked for experience, training, and background. She had none of that. She had hesitated, pen hovering over the paper, thinking of all the reasons she should walk away. But something inside her had pushed her forward. She had written her name slowly, almost apologetically, as if asking permission to dream. Now standing here, doubt returned stronger than ever. Her mind filled with questions. What if they laugh? What if she forgets everything? What if she proves everyone right? The same voices she had heard her whole life echoed in her head, voices that said she was not good enough, not special, not meant for moments like this. A staff member called out the next performer's name. It wasn't hers yet. She took a deep breath and closed her eyes. She thought about the nights she practiced alone when no one was watching. She thought about how music had always been her escape, the one place where she felt honest and free. That memory gave her a small sense of calm, though fear still stayed close. When her name was finally called, it sounded unfamiliar, as if it belonged to someone else. For a moment she did not move. She wondered if anyone would notice if she stayed where she was. But then she felt the weight of all the silent hours she had spent preparing. Slowly, she stepped forward. As she walked toward the stage, she felt every eye turned toward her. The lights were bright and unforgiving. She could not see individual faces clearly, but she could feel their attention. Some people leaned forward with curiosity. Others exchanged quick looks. A few smiles appeared, not kind ones, but the kind that came from judgment. She heard whispers. They were not loud, but they were sharp enough to cut. Someone laughed softly, someone else shook their head. The sounds were small, yet they felt heavy. Each step she took became harder than the last. Her face grew warm and her throat felt tight. She reached the center of the stage and stopped. The silence that followed was uncomfortable, not respectful. It was the kind of silence that waits for failure. She felt exposed, like she had nowhere to hide. For a brief second, she considered turning back. No one would stop her. No one would blame her. Walking away would be easy. But then she remembered why she was there. She remembered the first time music had made her feel strong instead of weak. She remembered how it had carried her through lonely days and quiet nights. She reminded herself that this moment was not about proving anything to anyone else. It was about being true to herself, even if her voice shook while doing it. She took her place, adjusting herself carefully. Her hands trembled slightly, but she rested them where they needed to be. The audience waited. Some still smiled, expecting nothing. Others looked bored. None of them knew what this moment meant to her. She closed her eyes for just a second. In that brief pause, the noise faded. The whispers disappeared, the fear softened. There was only her, the stage, and the performance she had carried in her heart for so long. Whatever happened next, she had already done something brave. She had stepped forward when it would have been easier to stay invisible. And sometimes, that single choice is what opens the door to everything that follows. As she stepped closer to the center of the stage, the feeling in the room began to shift, though most people did not realize it yet. What had started as light laughter slowly turned into curiosity. She stood there quietly, adjusting her posture, taking in the bright lights and the many faces looking back at her. For a moment, it felt as if time slowed down. She could hear her own breathing, steady but deep, as if her body was preparing her for something important. Some people in the audience were still smiling, not in a kind way, but in a doubtful one. They whispered to each other, wondering why she was there at all. A few shook their heads, already convinced this would be a short and forgettable performance. From where they sat, she did not look like someone special. She looked ordinary, maybe even out of place. But what they did not know was the journey that had brought her to this moment. She closed her eyes for a second, not to escape, but to focus. In her mind, she returned to all the quiet moments that had shaped her. Late nights practicing alone, times when she sang softly so no one would hear, moments when music was the only thing that understood her. Those memories calmed her nerves. They reminded her why she was here. When she opened her eyes again, there was a new calm in her expression. The noise of the crowd faded into the background. She was no longer thinking about who was watching or what they expected. She was thinking only about the performance, about telling a story through her voice and presence. Her hands stopped shaking. Her shoulders relaxed. The music began slowly. The first sound was gentle, almost fragile. It caught a few people off guard. Some leaned forward slightly, unsure of what they were hearing. This was not loud or flashy. It was soft, controlled, and full of feeling. The room, which had been restless moments ago, began to grow quieter. As she continued, her confidence grew. Each note felt stronger than the last. Her voice carried emotion that could not be faked. It was not perfect in a polished way, but it was honest. And honesty has a power that perfection often does not. People who had been whispering stopped talking. Phones were lowered. Eyes were fixed on the stage. She was no longer just standing there. She was commanding attention without trying to. Her performance reached places words could not. It spoke of pain, hope, struggle, and strength. Even those who had mocked her earlier felt something shift inside them, though they did not fully understand why. In the front rows, a few faces softened. A man who had laughed quietly before now sat still, his arms crossed but his eyes focused. A woman who had looked bored now pressed her lips together, listening closely. The room felt different, heavier with emotion, yet strangely peaceful. She sang as if this was her only chance, not for fame or praise, but to be heard as her true self. The stage lights reflected off her face, highlighting expressions she was not trying to hide. Every feeling she had carried for years flowed naturally into the performance. There was courage in her voice, even when it trembled slightly. By the time the music reached its middle, the crowd was completely silent. Not because they were told to be quiet, but because no one wanted to break the moment. The same people who had judged her in seconds were now realizing how wrong they had been. They were witnessing something real, something rare. She did not notice their reactions. She was lost in the performance, fully present. For the first time in her life, she was not holding back. She was not trying to fit into what others expected. She was simply being herself. And in that moment, the balance of the room changed. What began with doubt and mockery was turning into respect. The audience did not yet know how deeply this performance would affect them, but they could already feel that something unforgettable was unfolding right in front of their eyes. The moment she walked back onto the stage for the fifth part of the event, the air felt different. Earlier laughter had faded, but doubt still hung quietly in the room. People were watching her more closely now, not because they believed in her, but because curiosity had replaced mockery. She could feel their eyes following every step she took. Her hands felt cold, but her heart felt steady in a strange way. She stood near the center of the stage, taking a deep breath. In that moment, memories rushed through her mind. She remembered all the times she had been ignored, laughed at, or underestimated. She remembered practicing alone when no one was watching, singing softly so she would not disturb anyone, performing only for empty rooms and quiet nights. Those memories did not make her weak, they made her strong. The judges whispered among themselves, the audience shifted in their seats, some people leaned forward, others crossed their arms, no one knew what to expect anymore. She closed her eyes for a brief second, not to escape the room but to gather herself. This was her moment, whether the world accepted it or not. When she began her performance, it started gently. Her voice was soft, almost fragile, like a secret being shared. The hall grew quieter. Even those who were not interested before found themselves listening. There was something honest in her sound, something real. It was not loud or flashy, but it carried emotion that could not be ignored. As she continued, her confidence slowly grew. Each note felt stronger than the last. Her voice carried pain, hope, and truth all together. It told a story without needing words to explain it. People in the audience began to feel something shift inside them. Some felt sadness they did not expect. Others felt memories rise to the surface. She was no longer the person they had laughed at earlier. On that stage, she became someone powerful. Her posture changed, her voice became clearer, and her presence filled the room. She did not perform to impress. She performed because this was who she was. A few people in the audience exchanged looks. One woman quietly wiped her eyes. A man who had been smiling earlier now sat completely still. The judges stopped whispering and watched her carefully. The room was fully hers now. She reached the most emotional part of her performance. Her voice slightly trembled, not from fear but from feeling. It made the moment even more real. No one coughed, no phones rang, no one moved. The room felt frozen in time. When she sang the final note, she let it fade naturally, not rushing it. She opened her eyes slowly. For a second, there was complete silence. It was the kind of silence that speaks louder than noise. She stood there breathing quietly, unsure of what would come next. She did not smile, she did not bow, she simply waited. In that moment, she realized something important. No matter what happened next, she had already won. She had been heard. She had shown her truth. She had turned pain into something beautiful. And deep inside the hearts of many people in that room, something had changed forever. The moment her performance ended, the room did not react the way anyone expected. There was no immediate clapping, no cheers, no whispers. Instead, there was complete silence. It was the kind of silence that felt heavy, deep, and emotional. People sat frozen in their seats, unsure of what to do or say. Just a few minutes earlier, the same room had been full of judgment and quiet laughter. Now no one dared to make a sound. She remained standing on the stage, her hands slowly lowering to her sides. Her heart was beating fast, and for a brief second, doubt returned. She wondered if she had done something wrong. She wondered if the silence meant her performance was not good enough. She avoided looking at the audience, afraid to see disappointment on their faces. But the silence was not disappointment, it was shock. People were still processing what they had just witnessed. The performance had touched something deep inside them, something unexpected. Many had come prepared to judge her, to dismiss her before she even began. They never imagined they would feel so moved, so emotionally shaken, by someone they had underestimated. A woman in the front row slowly lifted her hand to her face, wiping away tears she did not realize had fallen. A man sitting beside her took a deep breath, his eyes fixed on the stage. Others felt a tightness in their chest, a strange mix of guilt and admiration. They remembered the thoughts they had before the performance, the looks they had exchanged, the quiet mockery. Now those thoughts felt heavy and wrong. On stage, she finally looked up. What she saw surprised her. Faces that once showed doubt now showed emotion. Some eyes were red. Some people sat with their hands clasped together as if holding on to the feeling they did not want to lose. She realized then that the silence was not rejection, it was respect. A few seconds later, one person began to clap. The sound was soft at first, almost hesitant, then another joined, and another. Soon the entire room filled with applause. It was not loud or wild, it was slow, steady, and meaningful. The kind of applause that came from the heart. She felt her throat tighten, her eyes filled with tears, but she did not try to stop them. For the first time, she allowed herself to feel proud. Not because she wanted attention, but because she had stayed true to herself despite fear and judgment. True to herself despite fear and judgment. The judges exchanged glances, clearly moved. One of them leaned forward, no longer sitting back with crossed arms. Another nodded slowly, impressed and thoughtful. They had seen many performances, but this one was different. It was not perfect in a technical sense, but it was honest, raw, and deeply human. The audience had changed too. The same people who had mocked her entrance now sat quietly, reflecting on their own behavior. Some felt ashamed. Others felt inspired. Many realized how quickly they judged without knowing her story. She took a small bow, not dramatic or confident, just simple and sincere. The applause grew slightly louder. A few people stood up not to show off, but because they genuinely felt she deserved it. Tears continued to fall from faces across the room. As she walked off the stage, her legs felt weak, but her heart felt lighter than it ever had. She did not know what would happen next. She did not know if this moment would change her life forever. But she knew one thing for sure: she had been heard. Behind the stage, she paused for a moment and took a deep breath. The noise from the audience faded slightly, but the feeling stayed with her. All the years of being overlooked, judged, and doubted suddenly felt worth it. Not because she had proven others wrong, but because she had proven herself right. That silence before the applause became the most powerful moment of her life. It was the moment when judgment turned into understanding, when mockery turned into respect, and when one performance quietly changed everyone in the room. By the time the performance ended, the room was no longer the same. The woman stood quietly on the stage, her hands lowered, her breathing slow and uneven. She did not smile. She did not bow dramatically. She simply stood there, unsure of what would come next. For a brief moment, there was complete silence, the kind that feels heavy but meaningful. Then something unexpected happened. One person in the audience slowly began to clap. It was not loud or dramatic, just a simple, honest clap. Another followed, then another. Within seconds, the entire room was filled with applause. Some people stood up without even realizing it. Others wiped tears from their eyes. The same people who had laughed earlier were now clapping the loudest. The woman looked up in surprise. Her eyes searched the audience, almost as if she was trying to understand what she was seeing. Moments ago, she felt small and unwanted. Now she felt seen. She remembered the laughter from before, the whispers, the looks that made her doubt herself. Those memories were still there, but they no longer hurt the same way. The applause washed over her like a warm wave, slowly replacing years of quiet pain with something new: respect. In the front rows, a few people exchanged embarrassed glances. Some lowered their heads. They realized they had judged her too quickly. They had decided who she was before giving her a chance, and now they were forced to face their mistake. One of the judges stood up. His face was serious, but his eyes showed emotion. He spoke into the microphone and admitted something rare. He said he was wrong. He said he had expected very little and received something unforgettable. The audience listened carefully. His words were not just about her performance. They were about learning not to judge. The woman felt her throat tighten. She had spent most of her life being ignored or misunderstood. She had learned to stay quiet, to not take up space. Hearing those words made her feel like all the quiet moments, all the practice in empty rooms, all the times she doubted herself, none of it was wasted. She thought about her past. About the days when she practiced alone, when people told her to be realistic, when she almost gave up. She remembered the voices that said she was not good enough. Standing there now, she realized that those voices no longer had power over her. The applause continued, and this time she allowed herself to smile. It was not a wide or proud smile, but a soft one filled with relief. She gave a small bow, her hands shaking slightly. The crowd responded with even louder applause. Backstage, the atmosphere was different too. People who had ignored her earlier now approached her. Some apologized quietly. Others praised her courage and talent. She listened politely, still trying to process everything. She was not angry. She was simply grateful. For the first time, she felt something change inside her, not just how others saw her, but how she saw herself. She realized she did not need approval to be worthy, but being understood felt powerful. As she left the stage area, she took one last look back. The lights, the audience, the piano or microphone, it all felt unreal. But the feeling in her chest was real. It was confidence slowly growing, replacing years of doubt. That night she walked out not as the woman people laughed at, but as someone they would remember. And for her, that made all the difference. The night ended, but the impact of her performance did not. Long after the lights dimmed and the audience slowly left their seats, people were still talking about her. Some spoke in soft voices, others with excitement, but all of them carried the same feeling. They had witnessed something rare. What began as mockery had turned into a moment that stayed in their hearts. Backstage, she sat quietly, still trying to understand what had just happened. Her hands trembled, not from fear this time, but from emotion. She replayed the performance in her mind, wondering if it was real. A few minutes earlier, she had walked onto the stage feeling small and unwanted. Now, strangers were searching for her name, asking about her story, wanting to know more. People approached her slowly with respect in their eyes. Some apologized for laughing earlier. Others thanked her for making them feel something they had not felt in a long time. She listened, nodded, and smiled shyly. She was not used to attention like this. For years, she had lived quietly, staying in the background, never expecting to be seen. That night changed how she saw herself. In the days that followed, messages began to arrive. The video of her performance spread online. People from different places shared it, writing comments about courage, hidden talent, and never judging too soon. Many said her performance made them cry. Others said it reminded them of their own forgotten dreams. Opportunities slowly opened up. She was invited to perform again, this time without laughter, without doubt. Music teachers offered guidance. Event organizers asked if she would like to share her story along with her performance. For the first time, she felt that the world was listening. But what mattered most to her was not the attention or praise. It was the confidence she gained. She no longer walked with her eyes down. She no longer felt the need to disappear into the crowd. The stage that once terrified her now felt like a place where she belonged. She continued working at her job, still wearing the same uniform, still serving people with kindness. But something inside her had changed. She carried herself differently. She knew that her worth was not decided by first impressions or cruel laughter. It was defined by what she carried within her. Her family noticed the change too. They saw her smile more, speak with more belief, and practice music with a new sense of freedom. They had always known she was special, but now the world knew it too. The audience that once mocked her learned a lesson they would never forget. They realized how easily people judge and how often they are wrong. One performance was enough to break their assumptions and remind them of the power of humility and open hearts. Her story became more than just a viral moment. It became a reminder. Talent does not always arrive dressed in confidence, and greatness does not always announce itself loudly. Sometimes it walks quietly onto the stage, waits patiently through laughter, and then speaks through art. She did not become famous overnight, and her life did not suddenly turn perfect, but she gained something far more important: belief in herself. And with that belief, she stepped into the future without fear. That one performance did not just make people cry. It changed a life, and it left behind a truth that would echo far beyond the stage. Never underestimate someone simply because they seem unlikely.